Today we're going to be talking about strain theory. It's the first part of chapter 7, depending on which version of the textbook that you have. But strain theories are some of my favorite theories to talk about because I think that they have a lot of relevance for the social world as we're thinking about why people commit crime. Have some interesting explanations for why people might be engaging in crime. So, if you recall our objectives here, and you can follow along in your PowerPoint slides, we are going to be looking at the social and intellectual context of strain theories. We'll look at the role of the American dream and how it relates to strain theories. There are two different strain theories that we want to talk about. Actually, there are three. The first is Merton's strain theory, which is probably the most popular strain theory. And then we'll look at Agnew's general strain theory, as well as Mesner and Rosenfield's institutional strain theory. And of course, we want to think about policy implications. So as we're talking about each of these theories, I like for you to be thinking ahead of time how we can use what we're learning about strain theories to change programs, laws, and protocols as it relates to the prevention of crime or reactions to crime. All right, so let's jump in by talking about the fact that strain theories are typically classified in certain ways. First of all, they are macro theories, so they tend to take a top-down approach, big picture approach to understanding crime. In other words, we would look at crime rates rather than looking at individual commission of crime. So it's more of a big picture that strain theories give us. Also, strain theories are structural theories. So they look at the way that society is organized, looks at the various features of society, and looks to those structural features to explain why we see crime taking place, particularly among certain demographics of people. Also, the belief is that crime is a product of social forces, that there are these forces that are external to the individual, kind of pushing them towards engaging in crime. Again, a lot of that is going to be based on real or perceived group membership. So the idea is to identify structural flaws so that we can amend our structure or revise our social structure to improve upon some of the flaws that might lead people to act out in criminal and deviant ways. And lastly, we want to identify sources of and adaptations to strain, right? It's called a strain theory. So we can think about the stressors or the things that cause frustration, or that's probably a good way to put it, frustration on particular classes of people in our society and how they adapt to that, how they are impacted by it. All right. So let's now look at the next slide, which is on the social context of of strain theories. All right. The first, as you can see, is the Great Depression. It's a very important part of the social context out of which strain theories are born. You have to think about during the Great Depression, there was a collapse of social traditions, and the effect that it had on people and institutions was very apparent. It pretty much changed life as people knew it. Durkheim, you may remember him if you've ever had an introduction to sociology class, but he's a famous French theorist who actually gave us this term called anomie. And he said anomie is a feature of the social world where people, when social traditions break down, there's this sense of normlessness. Like people don't know how to behave, people don't know what to expect, and as a result, deviant behavior can emerge. And so Durkheim's notion of anomie and the experiences of those who lived through the Great Depression really helped criminologists to make important connections between the social structure and deviant behavior. The second aspect of the social context is the New Deal, which represents government's efforts to rearrange society, particularly in the wake of the Great Depression. The New Deal. It required an examination of the social structure. So the New Deal was the project or the campaign that President Franklin D. Roosevelt took on. And this was the name that he gave his complex package of economic programs from 1933 to 1936. And his goal was, well, he had three goals actually, and we call them the 3 R's. They are giving relief to the unemployed, and particularly farmers who were hurt very bad by the Great Depression. So the first R is relief. The second R is reform of business and financial practices that perhaps led to the Great Depression in the first place, and reform of business and financial practices that could prevent a Great Depression, hopefully, from happening in the future. So we have relief, so taking some of the pressure off those who were unemployed or farmers who were badly hurt. We have reform of business and financial practices. And the last R is recovery. Recovery for the economy during and following the Great Depression. The third aspect of the social context is the collection of demographic data. This brought to light that certain segments of society were being affected by crime, particularly with higher crime rates. So again, not looking at individual crime, but looking at the big picture, the rate at which certain classes of people were being impacted by crime. And we began to see that picture emerge when we started systematically as a society collecting demographic data. Demographic data, of course, deals with the usual suspects such as race, class. Class could be education levels, income levels, gender. Today they include things like status, sexuality. All of those things would be indicators of demographic information, region, etc. Okay,